If a totalitarian ruler started by rounding up people and locking them up in jails, all hell would break loose. Then people would, fight this. It's a process of manipulation, a process of gaslighting even. That would be the correct term. By redefining certain concepts, which you've seen throughout COVID now, individual freedom, that's no longer a thing. Then you are selfish, with no regards for others. So you need to get vaccinated, and then you are, you are a good guy. So, it's pretty much debates are no longer about, right or wrong. It's always about good or bad. And in a democracy, that should never have a place.
Thank you, President Metsola, Chairman McAllister of the Committee on...
It really annoyed the hell out of me how he, so openly disregarded democracy, disregarded his citizens, labeling them as terrorists, criminalizing them. And that really, to me, it was like, and this guy shows up, the so-called heart, the democratic heart of Europe. And I'm like, this can't be true. So I figured someone has to tell him that is not acceptable and that not all of us appreciate his presence. So that's what I decided to do, and that's what I did. According to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Didn't even have, any kind of, I don't know, I didn't need to get my guts together or something like that. I guess that's just the way I am. Who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you. It felt good. It really felt good.
I assure you, Ms. Anderson, that Prime Minister Trudeau will address this House and exchange with us on the most important topics that we are facing today.
Yeah, well, I was just admonished by the President of Parliament, Metsola. She very sternly told me that she can assure me that, but Mr. Trudeau will speak in the House.
We all have a lot of work to do, and collaboration will be key to success.
His speech was so boring. It was so monotonous. There were, his voice never even changed. It was, I almost fell asleep, to be quite frank.
In the words of Volodymyr Zelensky, light will win over darkness.
They're dictating to the people what will they have to have. So that's not how democracy is supposed to work. And that just really bothers me when, the concepts get twisted in a completely different direction to the point that they are so extorted and perverted. And that really got to me. So it did feel good telling him that.
Merci beaucoup, mes amis.
And then the standing ovations he supposedly got, well, out of these, 70 MEPs, there were 30, 35 standing up, applauding him. So that's the standing ovation he was, celebrated for all over the globe. Yeah, well, I think not. And the interesting thing is, though, usually when a world leader speaks in the House is packed. And it was, it wasn't like how it was said in some media outlets that the MEPs stood up and left in protest of his speaking. No, that wasn't the case. They never even bothered to show up. That's the important issue, because they were I don't know, maybe 50, 60, 70 MEPs out of a 705 who were actually there. yeah, that wasn't quite as spectacular as especially the Canadian media made it out to be. It was, if I had to put a word to it, I would say it was a big flop, a failure. Yeah, well, what happened after that? Did I get a response? Heck yeah, it was just incredible. People, they are so desperate for just someone who is an elected representative to speak up. That, you know, anyone having said the same thing that I said would have gone viral too. So it's like they're so desperate because they don't see their elected representatives representing them anymore. Being a parliamentarian, the idea actually was that since you couldn't always consult all citizens on certain matters, the idea was to have elected representatives who would then decide on behalf of the people. So that was the idea, really. It's actually a good idea. The problem is just at a certain point, these elected representatives are so far away from the people who they are supposed to represent. They, sort of get a life of their own, a mind of their own, and they no longer feel the need to actually check with what do people want. So they're rather, following their own agenda, and it's basically a perversion of what elected representatives should do. I usually try to be in the office by 9 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes we do have meetings starting at 8. So obviously I have to be in before that. And then you participate in these meetings. Of course, you need to get prepared for these meetings. You have an agenda. You need to, view all the documentation for that particular meeting to see what the colleagues are, proposing. Lay out your arguments. Are you for it? Are you against it? So that you can actually participate in the debate. There is a lot of meetings going on. So throughout the day, sometimes it is packed. So I'm actually leaving one meeting, getting briefed on the way for the next meeting, appointments with journalists. Then you have, lobbyists, of course, are showing up too. Though they do not want to see me that often anymore. I'm a member of the AfD, Alternativen für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany. And my party was basically founded in 2013 as a direct response to the catastrophic policies of the parties that had been in place up until that point. So to me, it was actually a pure act of self-defense that I decided to go into politics, get active, do something about it. So we were, first we were anti-Europeans, anti-Euro, then it went on to we were being, xenophobes. Of course, we were Islamophobes. I mean, we were, kind of any kind of ism you can think of. That's what we are being slapped with. The media plays a major part in this. In Germany, the media is referred to as the fourth power in the state, basically controlling government, but they're no longer doing this. Instead of reporting on what is, they're reporting on what they want it to be. lecturing people on what they should think and what opinions are right. And they should just present, various aspects to a certain story and let the people make up their own mind, come to their own conclusion. But that is no longer happening. So we actually do have kind of an atmosphere of fear going on. And I would guess it's not just the case in Germany, but pretty much in every Western democracy by now. Once I joined AfD, there were certain friends that looked at me funny all of a sudden, or people that have known me for decades suddenly accused me of being racist, even though they know perfectly well, how my life went. And there is just no way in the world that I could be a racist. But they still, kind of looked at me funny. So yeah, that did happen. But, and there were some, acquaintances that would no longer speak to me. But I always figured, well, they're going to come around. They will see where this leads, because I see where this is going. And this has nothing to do with democracy anymore. And pretty soon it will infringe on everyone's private life. And once that happens, they might remember, Christine did say that 10 years ago, here we are. She might have been right. So rather than, trying to be annoyed with them or, I just let it be, and they will figure it out sooner or later.
Can I say that as a COVID committee chair, I do regret the decision by Pfizer that is why, upon conceiving the communication on the cancellation of the participation of Mr. Burla, both the Secretariat, as myself, in my capacity as chair of the committee, have reached out directly to our contacts at Pfizer, clarifying that Mr. Burla is a person of key interest for the committee and that his participation in the hearing is vital to the work of our committee members.
Last year, more than 1 out of every 6 people on Earth used a Pfizer medicine or vaccine.
A lot of people think that, the actual work, parliamentary work, actually happens in the committee meetings. Well, once again, that was the idea, but the way it's done now, it's not really happening this way anymore. I mean, we're sitting there, we have an agenda, and we work through the points. But once again, there is no exchange of opinions on a particular matter that then, gets agreed upon, or, this is simply not happening.
We have delivered more than 3.8 billion vaccines to 181 countries and territories in the region of the world.
It seems like the result is already predetermined, and the discussion is then being steered towards that, predetermined result. The chair is actually sitting there, and she feels obligated to protect the guests we are inviting to be questioned.
Waar ik een duidelijk antwoord op wil. And I will speak in English so there are no misunderstandings. Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
This is scandalous.
So it's not like that I have a certain time slot to ask my questions. And then, in a back and forth kind of conversation, all of the groups, they just ask their questions and, one at a time. And then the expert answers all of these questions. obviously what will happen is they pick and choose what questions they will answer.
Regarding your specific question as to whether a contract negotiation such as this contract, which you referred to, 1.8 billion doses, was negotiated through an SMS, I can categorically tell you that would not be the case.
More often than not, the question that I ask, of course, doesn't get answered. The most that I, can possibly hope for is that I get reprimanded for having even asked that question. I am proposing that this committee declares itself incompetent in getting clarification on the content of the contracts between EU Commission and pharmaceutical companies with regards to the mRNA vaccines in general and the exchange of text messages between Ursula von der Leyen, President of EU Commission, and Mr. Bourla, CEO of Pfizer in particular. It is quite obvious in today's proceedings...
Mrs. Anderson, we'll put that on the agenda of the coordinators.
I will raise my point of order now, and according to the rules, you will have to let me continue.
Okay, you continue.
Thank you. It is
not,
quite
not
obvious.
More than a minute, not more than a minute. You don't have to make full statements.
Okay, this committee lacks the authority to get to the bottom of crucial questions. The fact that Mr. Bourla, CEO of Pfizer, had the audacity to refuse to appear in front of this committee to answer question constitutes a gross disregard for the people whose tax money he took, by the way. If we cannot compel a crucial player to appear in front of this committee, then this committee is useless.
Can I remind this committee, this is not an investigating committee.
Exactly.
This is a special committee. And this falls not within, the remits of this committee. So we will have a discussion in the coordinators, and the ID group can
Madam Chair,
take all the initiatives towards the
point
conference of presidents. And now I cut you off. This is it.
I wouldn't say it's frustrating. It could be. I will admit that. It could be. And it would be if you let it get to you, if you took it personally. So, yeah, I can kind of see that. But I try not to let it get to me. I always figure if they have to deal with me this way, they basically have no answer. And they are basically found out, and I know that I've basically found out what they're just a bunch of BS. But, looking at it that way, that actually gives me at least, some kind of a satisfaction. If they had an answer, they would just, deal with my question on the merits of my question rather than, it's kind of like, the argumentum ad hominem. Once someone does that, I know I've won.
When are they going to fully release the contracts that they signed? And here's the reason why. These are some of the pages from one of the contracts as he was released to the public and to us as members of the European Parliament after the media and us requested that the contracts be released to the public. This is unacceptable. We have, out of 120-30 pages of a contract, tens of those pages that are blacked out like this. Even today, more than a year after these injections were purchased, we don't know all the clauses of this contract or of these contracts. This is totally unacceptable. And we gotta get to the bottom of this and find out all the clauses of these contracts. And obviously the second question is, if they don't have anything to hide, why do they hide these contracts? Thank you.
And I would ask the pharmaceutical companies, but I would also ask the regulatory authorities of the EU. How come that you granted a normal market authorization? What is the basis of your decision? Where are the clinical data, and especially the primary data? Thank you.
Ma question concerne les effets secondaires. Il y en a beaucoup. Des études rapportent en France plus de 30 000 cas Pfizer que ce soit des AVC, des embolies pulmonaires, des décès. Au niveau européen, c'est plus de 900 000 cas, dont 8 200 décès. Hier, aucune réponse à ces questions ont été faites. Même le mot effet secondaire n'a pas été dit par ces gens. Donc c'est un vrai sujet. Aujourd'hui, beaucoup de victimes ont des effets secondaires à cause de ce vaccin. Et ma question était, est-ce qu'ils ont mis un fonds en place avec plus de 36 milliards d'euros de contrats? Est-ce qu'ils ont pensé à ces victimes? Est-ce qu'ils souhaitent, puisque c'était leur mot d'hier, de la confiance, est-ce qu'ils comptent mettre en place un fonds pour ces victimes? Et surtout, est-ce qu'ils ont la conscience tranquille par rapport à cette clause d'irresponsabilité?
At the time of the approval of your medical products in European Union, the clinical trials that you presented to EMA and other institutions, were these clinical trials in their safety and effectiveness proven, confirmed by any independent researcher, somebody who isn't working for you, somebody from a university, an independent researcher, a third party, anyone, or was it all just the documents you provided and that was all that existed at that time? Thank you.
They specifically choose not to answer my question, but like comment on, basically stigmatize me having asked that question and thus feel the right not to even bother answering the question. But it is not their job. They are not to question what kind of question an MEP asks, because these are the questions that the people would ask these experts, but they can't be there. I'm supposed to do this, and once I do it, they don't have the right to stigmatize me for, asking the questions that the people want me to ask. I can quote a former MEP of the EU-Parlament, Claire Fox, and I had a conversation with her one day because I just found it peculiar that, she was a self-proclaimed Marxist, and she said to me, well, it's no longer about left and right, it's about democracy, and it's about defending democracy, and it's about the people versus some kind of a globalist elite or whatever. That's what this is really about. So the traditional, aisle, if you want to have left and right, that no longer really applies. One of my main drivers is really freedom, individual freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. That's what, generations have fought for to achieve. To get out of desperate situation of being, subjected to rulers who had all the money and it took even more from them, basically pushed them down. But people stood up and they fought to overcome this. Citizens aren't stupid, and citizens aren't naughty little children who have to be lectured to and have to be, indoctrinated or taught what's, wrong from right. No, citizens are responsible decision makers. That's what democracy is all about. And once you come across in a condescending way, by trying to tell people this is what you actually have to think now, that doesn't sit well with citizens, and they will fail eventually. My dad he fought in World War II. He was drafted when he was 16, so he was basically a kid himself. And at the end of the war, he became a prisoner of war with the Americans. He was released at the end of 1946, and then he realized, I am now sitting in communism, and that he just could not consolidate. They had a constitution, or were about to have a constitution, and it was like, the German Democratic Republic is what they were going to be called, and the constitution that was about to be was freedom of speech and, democratic principles and all of that. But that was not what he experienced. There were just letters on a piece of paper, but reality was quite different. So he spoke up against this. He used to visit these party rallies or these conventions they had, on a community level, obviously. So very small scale. But that makes it actually even worse. He was just a farmer's boy in a small, kind of village. So, and these party meetings they had there, he just went there and asked questions, trying to expose their contradictory behavior, But it didn't go that well for him. As you can imagine, he was arrested in 1950, and he was sentenced to 25 years of hard labor to Bautzen, which is one of the most horrific political prisons you can imagine. Luckily, he only had to serve 5 years of his sentence, which he didn't find out until the very day he was released. Having spent 5 years in prison, guess what? He still wouldn't shut up. So I was born and raised in Western Germany, actually. But so I didn't experience, totalitarianism firsthand, but I was pretty close. All of my relatives lived in GDR, and anytime we ever went anywhere, it was to GDR to visit our relatives, obviously. So from what I saw, from what I experienced being there, all I can say, thanks, but no thanks. I don't ever want to experience anything like that again, and I don't want anyone having to live through that again. We are not quite there yet, but they are preparing for it. And as the process moves along, the measures they will have to take to get their way will have to be more intense. And we are seeing that now. So it's no longer enough just to tell people, well, you can't say this because this would be bad. Now they need to have actual measures they can apply. And you see that with hate speech, you see that with disinformation. Then you see that when people took the streets to protest against COVID measures, the stigmatizing, of course, that went on the entire time. But then it was, brute police force actually applied. And when you look at some scenes, I remember a lady in Berlin, she was just standing there and holding a copy of the German Grundgesetz, the German Constitution. And she was being taken down by police. Can you imagine? So simply standing there, literally upholding the German Constitution, results in police violence against you? Are you guys serious? This is what you call democracy now? So while at the same time, that the people that were protesting were being called, they are anti-state, they're unconstitutional, they want to overthrow this. No, these people were trying to uphold the Constitution. So, and once again, you see this shift. The ones actually trying to abolish fundamental principles in our constitutions, they're the ones claiming, to uphold it. It's ridiculous. And looking at my father, at my dad, he risked imprisonment. So if he was capable and if he felt the need to speak up and to criticize GDR government, knowing fully well that he might possibly end up in jail, but he chose to do it anyway. And he didn't do it because he had nothing better to do. He did it not for him even. He did it because he wanted to make sure that his kids would not have to live in a regime like that. So I just figured if my dad was actually willing to do that, gosh, I really think I have to do it now, because the circumstances are not nearly as bad as they were back then. So if I wasn't willing to do what he was willing to do under these circumstances back then, what kind of a Democrat would I be? That's the question I always ask myself. And I always arrive at the same conclusion. It's, yes, this needs to be fought. And that's what I'm willing to do, and that's what I will continue to do. So the most important question I really have for the elected representatives and the elected governments, especially in the Western democracies, and it really is, how can you look in the mirror anymore? How can you live with yourselves anymore? Knowing fully well you are pushing mRNA injections on people in violation of the Nuremberg Code, which was set forth for very good reasons. You are, just pushing all of that aside, just so to ensure to spill billions and billions of dollars into pharmaceutical companies, who then don't even have to take any risks if something does go wrong. You are elected representatives. You are supposed to see to the best interest of the people. How can you live with yourselves? If my opinion on that, the way I see you are an utter disgrace, and you do not deserve to be elected representatives of the people, because the people deserve better than you. Get your act together and just think about what you were elected to do, and finally start doing it. Thank you.